My father demanded I hand over my 5-bedroom house to my sister. I calmly told him he didn't need to worry so much about his golden child, especially since she isn't even his. Hook. It was a Tuesday morning, sunlight streaming into my kitchen, making my perfectly crafted life feel, well, perfect. Until that text message shattered the peace. My family asked me to give up my house, the home I'd poured my entire soul into. But what they really asked was for me to burn down everything I'd ever built, just to keep them warm. Narrative begins. My father never texted, not unless he wanted something. So seeing his name pop up on my phone screen, even before I read a single word, already set my nerves on edge. We need to talk about your house. Family meeting tonight at 6 o'clock. Don't be late. No greeting. No pleasantries. Just a cold, hard command, as if I were still a child living under his roof, not a 34-year-old woman who had clawed her way to build everything she had from the ground up. I stared at the message for a long moment, my coffee growing cold in my hand, before I finally set the phone down. The house he was referring to had sat on 2 sprawling acres in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in our city. 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, a finished basement, and a backyard that looked like it had been ripped straight from a magazine spread. I'd bought it 3 years ago, a reward to myself after a major promotion to senior director at the marketing firm where I'd worked since college. Every mortgage payment, from my account, every piece of furniture, chosen by me. The down payment had practically drained my savings, but I'd done it. All of it. On my own terms. That evening, I arrived at my parents' house precisely at 6 p.m. The familiar colonial, the one I'd grown up in, somehow looked smaller every time I visited. Or maybe I just felt bigger now, unwilling to shrink to fit their expectations. My mother answered the door, her smile tight, a grim line that never quite reached her eyes. Your father's in the living room, she whispered, almost conspiratorially, with Vanessa. Vanessa, my younger sister, by 4 years. The favorite child. The one who could do no wrong. The daughter my parents actually wanted. Growing up, the difference in how they treated us was so blatant. Even our teachers noticed. Vanessa got ballet lessons and summer camps. I got library cards and hand-me-down clothes. When she turned 16, they bought her a brand new sedan. When I turned 16, I got a card with $50 inside. I walked into the living room to find my father in his usual armchair. Vanessa was perched on the edge of the couch, her eyes rimmed red, looking like she'd been crying for hours. Behind her, her husband, Trevor, stood awkwardly, his hand resting on her shoulder. Finally, my father said, glancing at his watch, despite me being precisely on time, the familiar barb, sit down. We have important matters to discuss. I remained standing. My voice was calm, though my heart was beginning to thump a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What's this about? A small, theatrical sob escaped Vanessa. My mother rushed to sit beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The performance, I realized with a weary sigh, was beginning. Your sister needs help, my father announced, his voice devoid of warmth. Trevor's company is downsizing. They're letting him go at the end of the month. I looked at Trevor, who at least had the decency to appear embarrassed. I'm sorry to hear that. Sorry doesn't pay bills, my father snapped, his eyes flashing with irritation. They're going to lose their apartment. They have 2 children to think about. Vanessa's kids were 7 and 4. Sweet enough children, despite their mother's influence. I'd always made an effort to be a good aunt, sending birthday gifts and showing up to their school events when invited. Have you looked into other positions? I asked Trevor directly, trying to inject some logic into the emotional theatrics. Before he could answer, my father cut in again. That's not the point. The point is they need somewhere to live while Trevor gets back on his feet. Somewhere stable. Somewhere big enough for a family. The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating, like a cloud of smoke I couldn't breathe through. I felt my jaw clench. You have that enormous house, my mother added, her voice taking on a pleading, wounded tone. 5 bedrooms for just 1 person. It doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense to me, I replied evenly, my voice surprisingly steady. It's my home. Family helps family, my father insisted, leaning forward in his chair, his eyes fixed on me with an intensity one knew all too well. Vanessa needs that house more than you do. You're single. You don't have children. You could easily find a nice apartment somewhere. The words landed like stones, each one hitting a raw nerve. I'd heard variations of this my entire life, that my needs were secondary, that my accomplishments were meaningless compared to Vanessa's mere existence. Let me make sure I understand, I said slowly, enunciating each word. You want me to give up the house I bought with my own money, that I pay for with my own salary, and move into an apartment so Vanessa and her family can live there instead? Not give up, Vanessa said quickly, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. We'd pay you rent. Eventually. Once Trevor finds something new. Eventually, I repeated, the word hanging in the air. And in the meantime? Silence. A deafening silence. They hadn't thought that far ahead, because they never expected me to question the plan. They expected me to fall in line, just like always. This is what family does, my father insisted, his voice rising, a vein throbbing in his temple. When I was young, my brother needed help. And we made sacrifices. That's what you do for the people you love. The people you love, I echoed, a humorless laugh catching in my throat. Tell me, Dad, when was the last time any of you made a sacrifice for me? My mother gasped, gasping, as if I'd uttered the most vile, offensive thing. How can you be so selfish? Vanessa has been in some kind of crisis our entire lives. I shot back, the anger I'd suppressed for years beginning to bubble. And somehow, I'm always the one expected to fix it. I turned to my sister, my gaze unwavering. Remember when you totaled your car in college because you were texting while driving? Who paid for the repairs? She looked away, a faint blush creeping up her neck. You did, but that was different. Different how? I pressed. Or what about when you and Trevor wanted that destination wedding in Mexico, but couldn't afford it? Who paid for your flights and hotel? You offered, she protested weakly, her voice barely a whisper. I was guilted into it by Mom and Dad. I corrected, the memories flooding back, each one a small wound that had never properly healed. Telling me what a horrible sister I'd be if I didn't help make your special day perfect. My voice grew colder. And when you needed a co-signer for your first apartment because your credit was terrible from all those maxed out credit cards, who signed? That's enough. My father barked, standing up from his chair, his face reddening. We didn't come here to relitigate the past. We're talking about the present, and right now your sister needs that house. Then she can buy it from me. I said calmly, my voice now steel. Market. Value. I'll even give you a family discount. Say, 20% off the appraised price. Trevor's eyes widened. He knew exactly how much houses in that neighborhood cost. That's outrageous. My mother sputtered, aghast. You know they can't afford that. Then I guess they can't afford my house. I picked up my purse from where I'd set it down, my hand steady. I came here as a courtesy, but I'm not having this conversation anymore. My answer is no. If you walk out that door, my father said, his voice dangerously cold, you're making a choice. You're choosing to abandon your family when they need you most. I paused at the threshold, his words echoing in the silence. For 34 years I had twisted myself into knots, bent myself into shapes, trying to earn their approval, trying to be worthy of the same effortless affection they poured over Vanessa. And in that moment, the devastating truth finally crystallized. I would never, ever be enough for them. I'm not abandoning anyone, I said, my voice clear and strong. I'm simply declining to set myself on fire to keep you warm. I looked at each of them in turn, my gaze lingering on my father's shocked face. You'll figure something out. You always do. Walking to my car, I expected to feel guilty. Instead, I felt a lightness I hadn't known in years. A freeing, exhilarating sense of weightlessness. The call started that night. My mother crying about how disappointed she was in me. My father leaving voicemails about duty and obligation. Vanessa sent a barrage of text messages that started with pleading and ended with vicious accusations. I blocked their numbers after the first dozen messages. I was done. Work became my sanctuary. I threw myself into a major campaign for our biggest client, staying late at the office, volunteering for weekend strategy sessions. My colleague, Jennifer, noticed the change in my routine during a coffee break one Thursday afternoon. You've been here past 8 every night this week, she observed, stirring cream into her cup. Everything okay? I considered deflecting, but then, for some reason, I found myself telling her an abbreviated version of the house situation. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her expression growing more and more incredulous as I explained my family's expectations. They wanted you to just hand over your house? She asked when I'd finished, her eyebrows disappearing into her hairline. The house you saved for years to buy. Apparently, family loyalty means I should live in a studio apartment while my sister raises her kids in my home, I said with a wry, bitter smile. Jennifer shook her head slowly. I have 3 sisters. We're close. But if any of them asked me to give up my house, I'd laugh them out of the room. That's not normal family dynamics. That's exploitation. Her validation shouldn't have mattered so much, but it settled something deep inside me. I'd spent so many years having my reality questioned by my parents that hearing an outside perspective confirmed my sanity. It felt therapeutic. Midway subscribe line, by the way, if you're still with me and finding yourself shaking your head at my family, make sure to hit that subscribe button. More unbelievable stories and boundary-setting journeys are coming your way. The weekend brought unexpected complications. I'd gone to the grocery store Saturday morning, my usual routine, when I ran into Trevor's mother in the produce section. Judith had always been polite to me at family gatherings, if somewhat distant. Now, she looked at me with open hostility. I hope you're proud of yourself, she said coldly, abandoning her cart to approach me. My grandchildren are going to be homeless because of your selfishness. Several other shoppers glanced our way. I felt my face heat up, but kept my voice level. Vanessa and Trevor's housing situation isn't my responsibility. They're family. You have more space than you could ever need. And you're letting 2 innocent children suffer. Judith's voice rose, attracting more attention. What kind of person does that? The kind of person who worked 3 jobs to save a down payment. I retorted, gripping my shopping cart handle tightly. The kind who earned her own success instead of expecting it to be handed over. Your son is a grown man with a college degree. I'm sure he'll find employment soon. He has applications out everywhere, but these things take time. Time they don't have, because you won't help bridge the gap. She stepped closer, lowering her voice to a harsh whisper. Vanessa told me what you did at your father's birthday dinner. Cruel doesn't begin to cover it. Destroying a family with vicious lies just because you're bitter and jealous. The accusation stung more than I wanted to admit. Those weren't lies. And if you think they were, you should ask my mother directly. I did ask. She's devastated by your vendetta against her. Against all of them. Judith's eyes narrowed. You've always resented Vanessa for being everything you're not. Warm, loving, a devoted mother and wife. You couldn't stand watching her be happy. I could have walked away. Should have walked away. Instead, years of suppressed frustration, of swallowed anger, suddenly bubbled over. Vanessa totaled 3 cars before she was 25. She maxed out credit cards, buying things she couldn't afford, and expected everyone else to bail her out. She's never held a job for more than 18 months because she gets bored or decides her boss is mean. The words poured out faster than I could stop them. I paid for her wedding. I co-signed her apartment lease. I've given her thousands of dollars over the years that were never paid back. And when she needed something again, nobody asked if I could afford it or if it was fair. They just expected me to comply. Judith's expression hardened. So, you're keeping score. How petty. No, I said, pushing my cart forward, cutting her off. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. Though clearly, nobody in this family understands that concept. And if they don't, she called after me, her voice dripping with venom, if my grandchildren end up in some shelter because their aunt was too selfish to help. I stopped and turned back. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the din of the supermarket. Then I guess you and your husband could offer them your spare bedroom. Or is helping family only mandatory when someone else is doing the helping? Her mouth opened and closed without sound. I didn't wait for a response. The encounter left me shaking. I abandoned my half-filled cart and went home, suddenly unable to bear being in public. My dog greeted me at the door with his usual enthusiasm, and I sat on the floor of my foyer, hugging him until the trembling stopped. That evening, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Family history you should know." Against my better judgment, I opened it. The sender was someone named Margaret Sutherland. The message was brief. I'm a distant cousin on your mother's side. We met once at a reunion when you were about 12. I heard through the family grapevine about recent events and thought you might want to know you're not the first person Eleanor has treated poorly. Attached are some letters between your grandmother and my mother discussing concerns about how Eleanor was raising you versus Vanessa. Your grandmother noticed the difference too. She tried to address it before she passed. I thought you should know someone saw what was happening and cared enough to try intervening. Best wishes, Margaret. The attachment was a scanned PDF of handwritten letters dating back 21 years. I sat at my kitchen table, reading them with tears streaming down my face. My grandmother, who died when I was 16, had written multiple times to Margaret's mother, expressing worry about the imbalanced attention I received. Eleanor is so focused on Vanessa that she barely notices when our older granddaughter achieves something remarkable. One letter read. The girl made honor roll again, and Eleanor mentioned it in passing as if it were nothing. Meanwhile, Vanessa brought home a mediocre report card, and Eleanor acted like she'd won a Nobel Prize. I've tried talking to Eleanor about it, but she gets defensive and changes the subject. I worry about what this is doing to the child's sense of self-worth. Another letter, dated 3 years later. I brought up the favoritism again, and Eleanor actually admitted she knows she treats them differently. She said Vanessa needs more attention, that she's more sensitive. But what about her other daughter? When does that child get to be the priority? I'm watching a bright, capable young woman learn that she doesn't matter as much, and it breaks my heart. Reading my grandmother's words from beyond the grave felt like being given a gift I hadn't known I needed. Someone had seen. Someone had cared. Someone had tried to change things, even if unsuccessfully. The dates on the letters showed she'd been advocating for me from when I was around 11 until just before she passed. I wrote back to Margaret, thanking her for the letters and asking if she'd be willing to talk sometime. Her response came within an hour, providing her phone number and suggesting coffee whenever I was ready. 3 days later, my Aunt Paula called. She was my mother's older sister, and unlike the rest of the family, she'd always treated both Vanessa and me with equal kindness. I heard about the house situation, she said without preamble. Your mother is beside herself. I'm sure she is. She called me hoping I'd talk some sense into you. Paula paused. I told her you were the only one in the family who'd ever had any sense. Despite everything, I smiled. Thanks, Aunt Paula. That house represents everything you've worked for. Don't let them take it from you. Her voice softened. You know they've never been fair to you, sweetie. Some parents have favorites, and your mother and father never even tried to hide it. I know. I'm proud of you for standing your ground. She hesitated, and I heard something shift in her tone. There's something else. Something I debated telling you for years, but after hearing about this situation, I think you deserve to know the truth. My stomach tightened. What truth? It's about Vanessa. Paula took a deep, shaky breath. She's not your father's biological daughter. The words didn't process immediately. I sat down on my couch, phone pressed to my ear, trying to make sense of what she'd just said. What are you talking about? Your mother had an affair when you were 3 years old. It lasted about 6 months before she broke it off and recommitted to your father. He never knew. At least, your mother doesn't think he knew. But when Vanessa was born 9 months later, she looked nothing like your father. She had this light blonde hair and blue eyes, when both your parents have dark hair and brown eyes. You remember the family photographs? I did remember. I'd always wondered about it, but children accept what they're told without question. Your mother confided in me years later, when she'd had too much wine at Christmas. She made me swear never to tell anyone. Paula's voice carried an edge of defiance. But watching them treat you like you're disposable while elevating Vanessa to sainthood, I can't keep quiet anymore. You deserve to know why you've always been the afterthought. Does Vanessa know? I asked quietly, my voice thin. I doubt it. Your mother guards that secret like her life depends on it. In some ways, it does. Your father's family is very traditional. If he found out Vanessa wasn't his, that your mother cheated on him, it would destroy everything. We talked for another hour. Paula told me what she knew about the affair, a colleague from my mother's old job, someone who had been transferred to another state shortly after their involvement ended. She told me about my mother's panic when Vanessa was born looking so different from the rest of the family, the scrambling to explain it away with recessive genes and distant relatives. After we hung up, I sat in my living room as the sun set, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors. The knowledge settled over me like a heavy blanket. So much suddenly made sense. The preferential treatment wasn't just about personality or gender. It was about guilt. My mother had been overcompensating for 30 years, showering Vanessa with a love and attention that should have been divided equally, trying to erase her betrayal by making her affair's consequence the golden child. And my father, whether he consciously knew or simply suspected on some deep level, had gone along with it. Maybe it was easier to pretend everything was fine than to confront a truth that would shatter his marriage. Maybe he'd convinced himself that treating Vanessa better would make the doubt go away. Whatever the reason, I paid the price for their dysfunction my entire life. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I made a plan. The next family gathering was scheduled for the following Sunday, my father's birthday dinner. My mother had texted me before I blocked her number, insisting I attend, despite our argument. I unblocked everyone long enough to confirm I'd be there. When Sunday arrived, I dressed carefully in a navy blue dress and drove to my parents' house. The entire family had gathered. My parents, Vanessa and Trevor with their kids, my father's brother and his wife, and a handful of cousins. Aunt Paula caught my eye as I walked in and gave me a subtle nod. Dinner was awkward. Vanessa barely looked at me. My father made pointed comments about family loyalty throughout the meal. My mother kept trying to catch my eye with meaningful looks that I pointedly ignored. When dessert was served, my father's favorite chocolate cake, he stood to make a speech. He talked about family, about the importance of tradition, about how blessed he was to have such a wonderful life surrounded by people who loved him. Family is everything, he concluded, raising his glass. No matter what challenges we face them together. We sacrifice for each other. We put each other first. Everyone raised their glasses. Then I stood up. I'd like to say something, I announced. My father looked pleased, probably assuming I was about to apologize and agree to hand over my house. Of course. I've been thinking a lot about family lately. I began, my voice clear and steady, about sacrifice and love and what we owe each other. I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. And I've realized something important. I've spent my whole life trying to earn a place in this family, trying to be good enough, successful enough, generous enough to deserve the same love and respect that Vanessa gets without even trying. Sweetheart, this isn't the time, my mother started, her eyes wide with alarm. But it's never the time, is it, Mom? I countered, a wry smile playing on my lips. It's never the right moment to acknowledge that you've treated your daughters differently since we were children. That you've expected me to give and give, while Vanessa only takes. Vanessa's face flushed red. That's not fair. You're right. I agreed, looking at her directly. It isn't fair. None of this has ever been fair. I turned back to my father. You told me last week that family helps family. That when you were young, your brother needed help, and you made sacrifices. You acted like I was being selfish and cruel for wanting to keep the home I worked years to afford. You are being selfish, he said sharply, slamming his fist lightly on the table. Maybe. Or maybe I finally understand that I don't owe you anything, I said, letting the words hang in the air, weighted with the years of silent pain. Especially not after learning the truth about Vanessa. The room went completely silent. My mother's face drained of color. What truth? My father asked slowly, his eyes narrowing, his gaze darting between my mother and me. I looked at Vanessa, who stared at me with pure confusion, then at my mother, whose expression had gone from pale to pure panic. My mother had an affair when I was 3 years old, I said clearly, my voice resonating in the sudden stillness. Vanessa is the result of that affair. She's not your biological daughter, Dad. The chaos that erupted was immediate and overwhelming. My father's face went through several colors, shock, disbelief, then a horrifying shade of purple. My mother started crying, her hands flying to her mouth. Vanessa looked like she'd been slapped, reeling from the impact. Trevor, to his credit, grabbed their kids and hustled them into another room. Relatives started shouting questions, a cacophony of gasps and whispers. That's a lie, my father thundered, but his voice shook, betraying his conviction. That's a disgusting lie. Ask Mom, I suggested calmly, gesturing toward my mother, who was now openly sobbing. Ask her to explain why Vanessa looks nothing like either of you. Ask her about the colleague she was involved with when I was little. Eleanor. My father spun on my mother, his face contorted in disbelief and rage. Eleanor, tell them this is nonsense. My mother couldn't speak. She just cried harder, which was answer enough. Aunt Paula, bless her, appeared at my side. It's true, Gregory, she said softly, her hand resting gently on my back. Eleanor told me herself years ago. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. You knew. My father looked at his sister-in-law with an expression of profound betrayal. All these years, you knew and said nothing? It wasn't my secret to tell. Paula replied quietly, her eyes full of sorrow. My father's brother stood up from his seat, his face flushed with anger. This is a family dinner. Whatever issues you all have should be dealt with privately, not aired out like some trashy television drama. Oh, now we care about privacy? I looked at him directly, my voice laced with a bitter sarcasm. Where was this concern when everyone ganged up on me about giving away my house? That wasn't private business, was it? He had no answer for that. His wife touched his arm, trying to get him to sit back down, but he shrugged her off. My mother finally found her voice, though it came out as a broken whisper. Please, everyone, just calm down. This isn't what it looks like. Then what is it, Eleanor? My father's voice could have cut glass. Explain to me what I'm misunderstanding about you having an affair and passing off another man's child as mine for 3 decades. The cousins, who'd been watching this unfold like spectators at a car crash, began gathering their things, making excuses about early mornings and previous commitments. Within minutes, the dining room had cleared of everyone except my immediate family, Aunt Paula, and my father's brother, who seemed too shocked to move. My mother stood on shaking legs, mascara running down her cheeks in dark streaks. I never meant for any of this to happen. It was a mistake, a terrible mistake I've regretted every single day since. Not regretted enough to tell the truth, my father said bitterly. Not regretted enough to treat both your daughters fairly instead of trying to assuage your guilty conscience by spoiling the evidence of your betrayal. Don't talk about Vanessa like that. My mother cried. She's innocent in all of this. She didn't ask to be born. Neither did I. I interjected quietly, the pain in my voice raw. But somehow I'm the one who's paid the price for your choices my entire life. My mother turned to me with something close to hatred in her eyes. You've always been so quick to point out every little thing you thought was unfair. Always keeping track. Always making yourself the victim. Little things. The laugh that escaped me was sharp and humorless. You bought Vanessa a car and gave me $50. You paid for her college in full and told me I'd build character by taking out loans. When she got married, you threw her a $20,000 wedding. When I got engaged 5 years ago, you told me you couldn't contribute because money was tight. You called off that engagement. My mother protested, clutching at straws. Because I realized Nathan was controlling and emotionally abusive. And when I came to you for support, you told me I was being dramatic and throwing away a good man. You took his side over mine. The memory still burned. Vanessa's been married to Trevor for 9 years, and you've never once questioned whether he was good enough for her, even though he's gotten them into debt 3 separate times with bad investments. That's not fair to Trevor, Vanessa said, but her voice lacked conviction, sounding small and lost. None of this has been fair, Vanessa. That's the point. I grabbed my purse again, suddenly exhausted by the entire confrontation. I came here hoping for some acknowledgement of how unbalanced things have always been. Instead, I got demands and guilt trips. So, yes, I told the truth about your paternity. Maybe it was cruel timing. Maybe I should have found a gentler way, but I'm done protecting everyone else's comfort while sacrificing my own. Vanessa stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. This is insane. Mom, tell them it's not true. But my mother couldn't stop crying long enough to form words, and her silence spoke volumes. I picked up my purse. I came here to have one last dinner as a family to see if maybe somehow things could be different. But I realize now that this family was built on lies and favoritism, and I'm done trying to find my place in it. Wait, my father called out as I headed for the door. His voice had lost all its authority, all its bluster. You can't just drop this bomb and leave. Watch me, I replied. Oh, and Dad? You probably shouldn't worry too much about Vanessa needing my house. I'm sure her real father would be happy to help if you can track him down. I walked out into the cool evening air, got in my car, and drove away. Behind me, I could hear shouting, even through the closed door. The fallout was nuclear. My phone exploded with messages, but I was prepared this time. I'd already spoken to my attorney earlier in the week, making sure my house and assets were protected from any potential family claims. I changed my emergency contacts and removed my parents from my life insurance beneficiaries. Vanessa called from a number I didn't recognize a few days later. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. How could you? She screamed when I picked up. How could you ruin my life like this? I didn't ruin your life, Vanessa. I just stopped protecting everyone else's secrets at the expense of my own well-being. Dad won't even look at me. He packed a bag and left. Mom hasn't stopped crying for 2 days. Her voice cracked. Trevor's parents found out, and they're saying horrible things about our family. The kids are asking questions I can't answer. Then answer them honestly. I suggested, my voice calm, almost detached. Tell them that sometimes families are complicated. That genetics don't determine love. That mom made a mistake a long time ago, but it doesn't change who you are. Easy for you to say. You're not the one whose entire identity just got destroyed. No, I said, a bitter edge entering my tone. I'm the one who spent 34 years being treated as expendable. I'm the one who was expected to sacrifice everything I built so you could have an easier path. Again, the anger I'd suppressed for years rose in my throat. Did you ever wonder why I was always the one who had to give things up? Why I was the one who got the hand-me-downs and the lukewarm affection while you got brand new everything and unconditional love? That's not how it was, she protested weakly. That's exactly how it was, and you know it. You just never cared because it benefited you. She was quiet for a long moment. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry Mom and Dad treated you differently. I'm sorry I didn't notice, or didn't care. I'm sorry for everything. Does that fix anything? No, I said honestly. But it's a start toward you taking responsibility for your own life instead of expecting everyone else to clean up your messes. I don't have anywhere to go, she whispered, her voice small. Trevor's parents won't help us after all this. Our lease is up in 3 weeks. We have 2 kids and nowhere to live. For just a moment, I felt the old, familiar pull, the instinct to step in, to solve the problem, to sacrifice my comfort for hers. Then I remembered every slight, every disappointment, every time I'd been made to feel less than. There are resources for families in transition, I said, my voice firm. Temporary housing assistance, job placement services. You'll figure it out. You sound just like Dad, she said bitterly. No, I corrected, a faint smile playing on my lips. I sound like someone who's finally learned to set boundaries. There's a difference. I took a breath. I hope you and Trevor land on your feet. I hope the kids are okay. But I'm not giving you my house, and I'm not going to feel guilty about it anymore. I hung up before she could respond. Over the following weeks, pieces of information filtered through to me via Aunt Paula, who'd become my only remaining connection to the family. My father had indeed left, moving into a hotel while he processed the revelation. He demanded a paternity test, which confirmed what everyone already knew. My mother had apparently confessed everything: the affair, the years of guilt, the desperate attempt to make up for her betrayal by making Vanessa the favorite. The aftermath rippled out in ways I hadn't anticipated. Paula told me that my father's brother had confronted my mother about other incidents over the years where she'd been dismissive or cold toward me. Apparently, I hadn't been imagining the subtle slights and forgotten birthdays. Other family members had noticed too, but like Paula, had felt it wasn't their place to interfere. Your uncle mentioned the time you graduated summa cum laude from college, Paula said during one of our phone calls. Your mother barely acknowledged it at the family dinner that weekend. But when Vanessa graduated with a C average for years later, Eleanor threw her a massive party and invited half the neighborhood. I remembered that weekend vividly. I'd worked myself to exhaustion, maintaining my grades while juggling 2 part-time jobs to pay for expenses my loans didn't cover. When I'd walked across that stage with the highest honors, I'd looked out into the audience, hoping to see my parents' proud faces. They had been there, technically, but my mother had spent most of the ceremony on her phone, and my father had left immediately afterward for a golf game he'd scheduled. She told me you didn't want a big fuss, Paula continued. That you'd specifically asked to keep things low-key. Was that true? I never said that, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. She never even asked what I wanted. The fact that my mother had rewritten history to excuse her negligence shouldn't have surprised me anymore, but it did. Did she make up a lot of these excuses over the years? From what your uncle is saying, now that he's actually thinking about it critically, yes. She had a story for everything. Why she couldn't attend your award ceremonies, but never missed Vanessa's dance recital. Why your achievements were downplayed while Vanessa's mediocre efforts were celebrated. It was always because you preferred it that way, or you were too independent to need the attention, or some variation on that theme. I found myself wondering how many other people had believed those lies. How many family members had thought I genuinely didn't care about recognition or support, when the truth was I'd simply learned to stop expecting it. Vanessa and Trevor found a smaller apartment across town. Trevor landed a new job, though with a significant pay cut. They were struggling but managing. The kids were resilient, as children often are. Meanwhile, my own life continued to improve in ways that had nothing to do with my family's implosion. The campaign I'd been working on won an industry award, resulting in a significant bonus and recognition from the firm's senior partners. I used part of the bonus to finally renovate my master bathroom, something I'd been planning since I bought the house. The contractor I hired, a woman named Ruth who came highly recommended, noticed the family photos I had displayed, or rather, the lack thereof. Most people have pictures everywhere when I'm working on their homes, she mentioned casually one afternoon while reviewing tile options. You've got a beautiful house, but it's almost like you moved in yesterday instead of 3 years ago. I glanced around, seeing my space through her eyes. She was right. I had artwork and decorative objects, but nothing personal. No family photos, no mementos from my childhood, nothing that connected me to my past. I'm not particularly close with my family, I said simply. Ruth nodded without prying further, and I appreciated her discretion. But the observations stuck with me. That evening, I went through boxes I'd kept in storage since moving in, the remnants of my life before this house. Old photos, school awards, letters from college friends, a journal I'd kept during my teenage years. Reading that journal proved illuminating, in painful ways. My 15-year-old self had written extensively about feeling invisible at home, about watching Vanessa receive praise for things I'd been doing for years without acknowledgement. One entry stood out. Got a 98 on my chemistry midterm. Mr. Peterson said it was the highest score he'd seen in 5 years. Told Mom at dinner, and she said, that's nice. Then spent 20 minutes talking about how Vanessa scored the winning goal in her soccer game. Sometimes I wonder if they'd even notice if I disappeared. I'd forgotten writing those words. I'd buried that particular pain under years of trying to be strong and independent. Seeing it now, preserved in teenage handwriting, made me want to reach back through time and hug that girl who'd been convinced her own worth was somehow less than her sister's. My parents started marriage counseling, though Paula wasn't optimistic about their chances. Too much damage had been done, too many lies told, too many years wasted on a foundation of deceit. Your father asked about you. Paula mentioned during our weekly call. Wanted to know if you were doing okay. I told him you seemed happier than I'd seen you in years. Did that bother him? I think it did, actually. He expected you to be falling apart, to need the family you destroyed with your revelation. Paula's tone made clear what she thought of that expectation. Instead, you're thriving. It's forcing him to confront some uncomfortable truths about the family dynamics he enabled. I thought about that conversation for days. My father had expected me to suffer consequences for speaking up, for refusing to continue playing my assigned role as the accommodating daughter who never made waves. The fact that I wasn't suffering, that I was actually doing better than ever, challenged his entire narrative about family loyalty and sacrifice. As for me, I stayed in my 5-bedroom house, with its hardwood floors and backyard garden. I adopted a dog from the local shelter, a golden retriever mix who loved long walks and sleeping in patches of sunlight. I got another promotion at work. I started dating someone I met at a friend's party, someone who thought I was remarkable exactly as I was. Sometimes I wondered if I'd been too harsh at that birthday dinner. If there had been a gentler way to handle things, a method that would have caused less collateral damage. Then I'd remember standing in my parents' living room, being told I was selfish for wanting to keep the life I'd built, and the guilt would evaporate. The truth was always going to come out eventually. Secrets that big never stay buried forever. Maybe I'd accelerated the timeline, but I hadn't created the situation. That honor belonged to my mother's choices 30 years ago, and my parents' decision to build a family dynamic on favoritism and lies. 6 months after the dinner, I received a letter from my father. It came to my office, since I'd changed my home address in all family records. The handwriting was his, careful and precise. I don't know how to begin this letter. It started. I don't know if you'll even read it, but I need to try. He wrote about the devastation of learning Vanessa wasn't his biological daughter, about feeling betrayed by my mother, and angry at Paula for keeping the secret. He wrote about the marriage counseling sessions where uncomfortable truths kept surfacing, where he had to confront his own role in creating such an imbalanced family structure. Your mother explained that she overcompensated with Vanessa out of guilt, he wrote. But that's only part of the truth. I suspected on some level that something was wrong. The timing of the pregnancy, the way Vanessa looked, your mother's behavior during that time. I chose not to examine it too closely because I was afraid of what I'd find. It was easier to go along with your mother's enthusiasm for Vanessa than to question why she was so different with you. The letter went on for several pages. He detailed memories I'd forgotten, school events he'd missed, accomplishments he'd overlooked, moments where I'd needed him and he'd been focused on Vanessa instead. He didn't make excuses, just acknowledged the pattern. I can't undo 34 years of mistakes, he concluded. I can't give you back the childhood you deserved or the father you needed. All I can do is apologize and hope that someday you might be willing to have a conversation, not about the house or about Vanessa, but about us, about whether there's any possibility of building something real instead of the broken dynamic we've had all these years. I understand if the answer is no. I've earned your distance, but I had to ask. Love, Dad. I read the letter 3 times, sitting at my desk while my colleagues bustled around me. The words seemed sincere, but sincerity without consistent change meant nothing. I tucked the letter into my bag and went back to work. That evening, I sat on my back porch with my dog at my feet and my phone in my hand. I thought about everything that had happened, about the girl I'd been who desperately wanted her father's approval, and then the woman I'd become who'd learned to approve of herself. Finally, I typed out a response and sent it before I could second-guess myself. I got your letter. I'm not ready to have that conversation yet, but I'm not saying never. I need time. I need to see consistent change, not just words. If you're serious about counseling and about examining your choices, then maybe someday we can try. but it has to be different. I won't accept being an afterthought anymore. I won't sacrifice myself for a family that's never valued me equally. If we rebuild anything, it has to be on honest ground with clear boundaries. Think about whether you can actually commit to that. His response came an hour later. Just 2 words. I understand. Whether he actually did remain to be seen. Whether my parents' marriage would survive the revelations. Whether Vanessa would ever speak to me again. Whether any semblance of family could be salvaged from the wreckage. None of it was certain. But my house was still mine. My life was still mine. And for the first time in 34 years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to live it fully. That felt like victory. Outro music begins, call to action. This whole experience changed everything for me. It was painful, messy, and devastating, but it also led to a level of peace and self-respect I never thought possible. I'm curious, what would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away sooner, or tried to fix things one more time? Let me know in the comments below. I truly want to hear your thoughts.
C'est quoi record du monde? C'est 2h14.